The philosophical scripture, The Transcendentalist, is brought to you by not a profit org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. The Transcendentalist, a lecture read at the Masonic Temple, Boston, January 1008, 142. The first thing we have to say respecting what are called new views here in New England at the present time is that they are not new, but the very oldest of thoughts cast into the mold of these new times. The light is always identical in its composition, but it falls on a great variety of objects, and by so falling is first revealed to us, not in its own form, for it is formless, but in theirs. In like manner, thought only appears in the objects it classifies. What is popularly called Transcendentalism among us is Idealism. Idealism as it appears in 1008, 142. As thinkers, mankind have ever divided into two sects, Materialists and Idealists, the first class founding on experience, the second on consciousness, the first class beginning to think from the data of the senses, the second class perceive that the senses are not final, and say, the senses give us representations of things, but what are the things themselves, they cannot tell. The materialist insists on facts, on history, on the force of circumstances, and the animal wants of man. The idealist on the power of thought and of will, on inspiration, on miracle, on individual culture. These two modes of thinking are both natural, but the idealist contends that his way of thinking is in higher nature. He concedes all that the other affirms, admits the impressions of sense, admits their coherency, their use and beauty, and then asks the materialist for his grounds of assurance that things are as his senses represent them. But I, he says, affirm facts not affected by the illusions of sense, facts which are of the same nature as the faculty which reports them, and not liable to doubt, facts which in their first appearance to us assume a native superiority to material facts, degrading these into a language by which the first are to be spoken, facts which it only needs a retirement from the senses to discern. Every materialist will be an idealist, but an idealist can never go backward to be a materialist. The idealist, in speaking of events, sees them as spirits. He does not deny the sensuous fact, by no means, but he will not see that alone. He does not deny the presence of this table, this chair, and the walls of this room, but he looks at these things as the reverse side of the tapestry, as the other end, each being a sequel or completion of a spiritual fact which nearly concerns him. This manner of looking at things transfers every object in nature from an independent and anomalous position without there into the consciousness. Even the materialist Condillac, perhaps the most logical expounder of materialism, was constrained to say, though we should soar into the heavens, though we should sink into the abyss, we never go out of ourselves. It is always our own thought that we perceive. What more could an idealist say? The materialist, secure in the certainty of sensation, mocks at feints, bun theories at star, gazers and dreamers, and believes that his life is solid, that he at least takes nothing for granted, but knows where he stands and what he does. Yet how easy it is to show him that he also is a phantom walking and working amid phantoms, and that he need only ask a question or two beyond his daily questions, to find his solid universe growing dim and impalpable before his sense. The sturdy capitalist, no matter how deep and square on blocks of Quincy granite he lays the foundations of his banking, house or exchange, must set it, at last, not on a cube corresponding to the angles of his structure, but on a mass of unknown materials and solidity, red, hot or white, hot, perhaps at the core, which rounds off to an almost perfect sphericity and lies floating in soft air, and goes spinning away, dragging bank and banker with it at a rate of thousands of miles the hour, he knows not whither, a bit of bullet, now glimmering, now darkling through a small cubic space on the edge of an unimaginable pit of emptiness, and this wild balloon, in which his whole venture is embarked, is a just symbol of his whole state and faculty. One thing, at least, he says is certain, and does not give me the headache, that figures do not lie. The multiplication table has been hitherto found unimpeachable truth, and moreover, if I put a gold eagle in my safe, I find it again tomorrow. But for these thoughts, I know not whence they are. They change and pass away. But ask him why he believes that an uniform experience will continue uniform, or on what grounds he founds his faith in his figures, and he will perceive that his mental fabric is built up on just as strange and quaking foundations as his proud edifice of stone. In the order of thought, the materialist takes his departure from the external world, and esteems a man as one product of that. The idealist takes his departure from his consciousness, and reckons the world an appearance. The materialist respects sensible masses, society, government, social art, and luxury, every establishment, every mass, whether majority of numbers, or extent of space, or amount of objects, every social action. The idealist has another measure, which is metaphysical, namely, the rank which things themselves take in his consciousness, not at all the size or appearance. Mind is the only reality, of which men and all other natures are better or worse reflectors. Nature, literature, history are only subjective phenomena. Although in his action overpowered by the laws of action, and so, warmly cooperating with men, even preferring them to himself, yet when he speaks scientifically, or after the order of thought, he is constrained to degrade persons into representatives of truths. He does not respect labor, or the products of labor, namely, property, otherwise than as a manifold symbol, illustrating with wonderful fidelity of details the laws of being. He does not respect government except as far as it reiterates the law of his mind, nor the church, nor charities, nor arts for themselves, but hears, as at a vast distance, what they say, as if his consciousness would speak to him through a pantomimic scene. His thought, that is the universe. His experience inclines him to behold the procession of facts you call the world, as flowing perpetually outward from an invisible, unsounded center in himself, center alike of him and of them, and necessitating him to regard all things as having a subjective or relative existence, relative to that aforesaid unknown center of him. From this transfer of the world into the consciousness, this beholding of all things in the mind, follow easily his whole ethics. It is simpler to be self-dependent. The height, the deity of man is, to be self-sustained, to need no gift, no foreign force. Society is good when it does not violate me, but best when it is likest to solitude. Everything real is self-existent. Everything divine shares the self-existence of deity. All that you call the world is the shadow of that substance which you are, the perpetual creation of the powers of thought, of those that are dependent, and of those that are independent of your will. Do not cumber yourself with fruitless pains to mend and remedy remote effects. Let the soul be erect, and all things will go well. You think me the child of my circumstances. I make my circumstance. Let any thought or motive of mine be different from that they are. The difference will transform my condition and economy. This thought which is called I, is the mold into which the world is poured like melted wax. The mold is invisible, but the world betrays the shape of the mold. You call it the power of circumstance, but it is the power of me. Am I in harmony with myself? My position will seem to you just and commanding. Am I vicious and insane? My fortunes will seem to you obscure and descending. As I am, so shall I associate, and so shall I act. Caesar's history will paint out Caesar. Jesus acted so because he thought so. I do not wish to overlook or to gainsay any reality. I say, I make my circumstance, but if you ask me, whence am I? I feel like other men my relation to that fact which cannot be spoken, or defined, nor even thought, but which exists and will exist. The Transcendentalist adopts the whole connection of spiritual doctrine. He believes in miracle, in the perpetual openness of the human mind to new influx of light and power. He believes in inspiration and in ecstasy. He wishes that the spiritual principle should be suffered to demonstrate itself to the end, in all possible applications to the state of man, without the admission of anything unspiritual, that is, anything positive, dogmatic, personal. Thus, the spiritual measure of inspiration is the depth of the thought, and never who said it. And so he resists all attempts to palm other rules and measures on the spirit than its own. In action, he easily incurs the charge of antinomianism by his avowal that he, who has the lawgiver, may with safety not only neglect, but even contravene every written commandment. In the play of Othello, the expiring Desdemona absolves her husband of the murder, to her attendant Emilia. Afterwards, when Emilia charges him with the crime, Othello exclaims, "You heard her say herself it was not I." Emilia replies, "The more angel she, and thou the blacker devil." Of this fine incident, Jacobi, the transcendental moralist, makes use, with other parallel instances, in his reply to Fichte. Jacobi, refusing all measure of right and wrong except the determinations of the private spirit, remarks that there is no crime but has sometimes been of virtue. I, he says, am that atheist, that godless person who, in opposition to an imaginary doctrine of calculation, would lie as the dying Desdemona lied, would lie and deceive as Pylades when he personated Orsts, would assassinate like Timoleon, would perjure myself like Epaminondas and John de Witt. I would resolve on suicide like Cato. I would commit sacrilege with David, yea, and pluck ears of corn on the Sabbath, for no other reason than that I was fainting for lack of food. For I have assurance in myself that, in pardoning these faults according to the letter, man exerts the sovereign right which the majesty of his being confers on him. He sets the seal of his divine nature to the grace he accords. In like manner, if there is anything grand and daring in human thought or virtue, any reliance on the vast, the unknown, any presentiment, any extravagance of faith, the spiritualist adopts it as most in nature. The Oriental mind has always tended to this largeness. Buddhism is an expression of it. The Buddhist who thanks no man, who says, "Do not flatter your benefactors," but who, in his conviction that every good deed can by no possibility escape its reward, will not deceive the benefactor by pretending that he has done more than he should, is a transcendentalist. You will see by this sketch that there is no such thing as a transcendental party, that there is no pure transcendentalist, that we know of none but prophets and heralds of such a philosophy, that all who by strong bias of nature have leaned to the spiritual side in doctrine have stopped short of their goal. We have had many harbingers and forerunners, but of a purely spiritual life, history has afforded no example. I mean, we have yet no man who has leaned entirely on his character and eaten angels' food, who, trusting to his sentiments, found life made of miracles, who, working for universal aims, found himself fed, he knew not how, clothed, sheltered, and weaponed, he knew not how, and yet it was done by his own hands. Only in the instinct of the lower animals we find the suggestion of the methods of it, and something higher than our understanding. The squirrel hoards nuts, and the bee gathers honey, without knowing what they do, and they are thus provided for without selfishness or disgrace. Shall we say, then, that Transcendentalism is the Saturnalia or excess of faith, the presentiment of a faith proper to man in his integrity, excessive only when his imperfect obedience hinders the satisfaction of his wish? Nature is transcendental, exists primarily, necessarily, ever works and advances, yet takes no thought for the morrow. Man owns the dignity of the life which throbs around him in chemistry, and tree, and animal, and in the involuntary functions of his own body. Yet he is balked when he tries to fling himself into this enchanted circle, where all is done without degradation. Yet genius and virtue predict in man the same absence of private ends, and of condescension to circumstances, united with every trait and talent of beauty and power. This way of thinking, falling on Roman times, made Stoic philosophers; falling on despotic times, made patriot Catos and Brutuses; falling on superstitious times, made prophets and apostles; on popish times, made Protestants and ascetic monks, preachers of faith against the preachers of works; on prelatical times, made Puritans and Quakers; and falling on Unitarian and commercial times, makes the peculiar shades of idealism which we know. It is well known to most of my audience that the idealism of the present day acquired the name of transcendental, from the use of that term by Immanuel Kant, of Königsberg, who replied to the skeptical philosophy of Locke, which insisted that there was nothing in the intellect which was not previously in the experience of the senses, by showing that there was a very important class of ideas or imperative forms which did not come by experience, but through which experience was acquired, that these were intuitions of the mind itself, and he denominated them transcendental forms. The extraordinary profoundness and precision of that man's thinking have given vogue to his nomenclature, in Europe and America, to that extent, that whatever belongs to the class of intuitive thought is popularly called at the present day transcendental. Although, as we have said, there is no pure transcendentalist, yet the tendency to respect the intuitions, and to give them, at least in our creed, all authority over our experience, has deeply colored the conversation and poetry of the present day, and the history of genius and of religion in these times, though impure, and as yet not incarnated in any powerful individual, will be the history of this tendency. It is a sign of our times, conspicuous to the coarsest observer, that many intelligent and religious persons withdraw themselves from the common labors and competitions of the market and the caucus, and betake themselves to a certain solitary and critical way of living, from which no solid fruit has yet appeared to justify their separation. They hold themselves aloof. They feel the disproportion between their faculties and the work offered them, and they prefer to ramble in the country and perish of ennui, to the degradation of such charities and such ambitions as the city can propose to them. They are striking work, and crying out for somewhat worthy to do. What they do is done only because they are overpowered by the humanities that speak on all sides, and they consent to such labor as is open to them, though to their lofty dream the writing of Iliads or Hamlets, or the building of cities or empires, seems drudgery. Now every one must do after his kind, be he asp or angel, and these must. The question which a wise man and a student of modern history will ask is, what that kind is. And truly, as in ecclesiastical history we take so much pains to know what the Gnostics, what the Essenes, what the Manichees, and what the Reformers believed, it would not misbecome us to inquire nearer home what these companions and contemporaries of ours think and do, at least so far as these thoughts and actions appear to be not accidental and personal, but common to many, and the inevitable flower of the tree of time. Our American literature and spiritual history are, we confess, in the optative mood, but whoso knows these seething brains, these admirable radicals, these unsocial worshippers, these talkers who talk the sun and moon away, will believe that this heresy cannot pass away without leaving its mark. They are lonely. The spirit of their writing and conversation is lonely. They repel influences. They shun general society. They incline to shut themselves in their chamber in the house, to live in the country rather than in the town, and to find their tasks and amusements in solitude. Society, to be sure, does not like this very well. It saith, Whoso goes to walk alone, accuses the whole world. He declareth all to be unfit to be his companions. It is very uncivil, nay, insulting. Society will retaliate. Meantime, this retirement does not proceed from any whim on the part of these separators. But if any one will take pains to talk with them, he will find that this part is chosen both from temperament and from principle, with some unwillingness, too, and as a choice of the less of two evils. For these persons are not by nature melancholy, sour, and unsocial. They are not stockish or brute, but joyous, susceptible, affectionate. They have even more than others a great wish to be loved. Like the young Mozart, they are rather ready to cry 10 times a day, "But are you sure you love me?" Nay, if they tell you their whole thought, they will own that love seems to them the last and highest gift of nature, that there are persons whom in their hearts they daily thank for existing, persons whose faces are perhaps unknown to them, but whose fame and spirit have penetrated their solitude, and for whose sake they wish to exist. To behold the beauty of another character, which inspires a new interest in our own, to behold the beauty lodged in a human being with such vivacity of apprehension, that I am instantly forced home to inquire if I am not deformity itself, to behold in another the expression of a love so high that it assures itself also to me against every possible casualty except my unworthiness. These are degrees on the scale of human happiness, to which they have ascended, and it is a fidelity to this sentiment which has made common association distasteful to them. They wish a just and even fellowship, or none. They cannot gossip with you, and they do not wish, as they are sincere and religious, to gratify any mere curiosity which you may entertain. Like fairies, they do not wish to be spoken of. Love me, they say, but do not ask who is my cousin and my uncle. If you do not need to hear my thought, because you can read it in my face and behavior, then I will tell it you from sunrise to sunset. If you cannot divine it, you would not understand what I say. I will not molest myself for you. I do not wish to be profaned. And yet it seems as if this loneliness, and not this love, would prevail in their circumstances, because of the extravagant demand they make on human nature. That, indeed, constitutes a new feature in their portrait, that they are the most exacting and extortionate critics. Their quarrel with every man they meet is not with his kind, but with his degree. There is not enough of him, that is the only fault. They prolong their privilege of childhood in this wise, of doing nothing, but making immense demands on all the gladiators in the lists of action and fame. They make us feel the strange disappointment which overcasts every human youth. So many promising youths, and never a finished man. The profound nature will have a savage rudeness, the delicate one will be shallow, or the victim of sensibility. The richly accomplished will have some capital absurdity, and so every piece has a crack. Tea is strange, but this masterpiece is a result of such an extreme delicacy, that the most unobserved flaw in the boy will neutralize the most aspiring genius, and spoil the work. Talk with a seaman of the hazards to life in his profession, and he will ask you, where are the old sailors? Do you not see that all are young men? And we, on this sea of human thought, in like manner inquire, where are the old idealists? Where are they who represented to the last generation that extravagant hope, which a few happy aspirants suggest to ours. In looking at the class of counsel and power and wealth, and at the matronage of the land, amidst all the prudence and all the triviality, one asks, where are they who represented genius, virtue, the invisible and heavenly world to these? Are they dead, taken in early ripeness to the gods, as ancient wisdom foretold their fate? Or did the high idea die out of them, and leave their unperfumed body as its tomb and tablet, announcing to all that the celestial inhabitant, who once gave them beauty, had departed? Will it be better with the new generation? We easily predict a fair future to each new candidate who enters the lists, but we are frivolous and volatile, and by low aims and ill example do what we can to defeat this hope. Then these youths bring us a rough but effectual aid. By their unconcealed dissatisfaction, they expose our poverty and the insignificance of man to man. A man is a poor limitary benefactor. He ought to be a shower of benefits, a great influence, which should never let his brother go, but should refresh old merits continually with new ones, so that, though absent, he should never be out of my mind, his name never far from my lips. But if the earth should open at my side, or my last hour were come, his name should be the prayer I should utter to the universe. But in our experience, man is cheap, and friendship wants its deep sense. We affect to dwell with our friends in their absence, but we do not. When deed, word, or letter comes not, they let us go. These exacting children advertise us of our wants. There is no compliment, no smooth speech with them. They pay you only this one compliment of insatiable expectation. They aspire, they severely exact, and if they only stand fast in this watch-tower and persist in demanding unto the end, and without end, then are they terrible friends, whereof poet and priest cannot choose but stand in awe. And what if they eat clouds and drink wind? They have not been without service to the race of man.